Hey everyone, welcome to the first video in our Mastering Angular Intermediate Concepts. I am Abhi and today we are diving deep into one of the most important topics of building scalable Angular applications, which is component communication. So by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how components can talk to each other using various techniques like @input decorator, output decorator, view child, content child, and our services. So we will be using our input decorators to sending data to our child, output to our parent, and we use view child and content child for direct component access. We will also be using our services for our app-wide communication. So by the end of this video, we will also build a practical notification system like this, which will demonstrate all these patterns. And I will show you when to use each approach in our real world scenarios. So this tutorial is not like any other tutorial where you learn component communication, but here you will actually learn how to build a practical notification system which can be used globally. Okay, so let's get started by setting up our project. So first let's create a new Angular application. I've opened my command terminal here and I'll run the command ng-new and my Angular application name, which will be this. Now this command will make sure to create a new Angular application with name advanced component demo. It will ask for the routing, I'll say yes, and style I'll go with SCSS. Now it will use npm to install all the packages we need, and it's done successfully, and we should have our application created. So next thing to do is open our Visual Studio Code, and inside this we need to load our project. So here inside the VS Code on my desktop I have created my application. I'll just take and drop it. I'll drag and drop it inside my Visual Studio Code, and now I have my Angular application up and running. Expand this window. Inside this I can open a new terminal, and I'm already in my project directory, which is advanced component demo. So I can run the command ng-serve to see if my application is working properly or not. So once I do that, okay, so it's running successfully on this browser. So if we click here, we have our Angular application up and running properly. Great. So now let's generate our other components which we need for our application. As I mentioned, we need a parent component, child component, a sibling component, and a notification component, right? So I'll just put all those commands here and create those components. So I'll do this quickly, as our main focus is to show you how to do interaction between these components. So as you can see, all these components have been created here inside our SRC. Inside the app, we have components folder which have our child, notification, parent, and a sibling component. So next thing we need to do is we need to create our service for the component interaction. So I'll run the command ng services data. So it will create a services folder and it will create a data service for me. Now here you see it has created our data.service.ts file. Great, we have done all the basic structure setup for our this Angular tutorial. So let's start with the most basic form of component communication, which is parent to child communication. For that we will be using our @input decorator. So this is our parent file and this is our child file. In most of the real world applications, this pattern is commonly used, where basically we have a container component like a parent component which receives all the data, and then it has to provide to its multiple child component like this one. You can say it for like an example of a dashboard which has multiple GUIs in it, which basically shows different datas in those different widgets. So let's implement the child component first. So basically our child component is the component which want to receive the data, right? So we are sending data from our parent, and to receive the data we will be using @input decorator, this one. And this decorator basically, for example, it will receive a message which will be of type string, and we will just initialize it as an empty string in the beginning so we don't get any undefined error. Okay, that's done. If we go into our HTML, if we want to display this message, right, we will just say p tag and we will say child received the message, and this message would be this message, right? And now we have to send this message from our parent component. So we'll go to our parent component HTML file, and inside this we need to display our child component, right? So in the parent we will display the child component which we want to display. We'll just do the basic, which is, we'll say this is parent component, okay? And inside this component we have an input tag. The input tag could be of type text, and we'll have here a ng model, okay? And we're gonna bind it to our property, which will be parent message, okay? And we will have a placeholder which we will call type a message. Cool. Now what we need to do is we need to take this parent message property and we need to define it in our TS file. So we will go here, and here we'll say parent message is, for example, this one, hello from parent, right? Now this will give error because we need to import forms module in our app.module.ts file in order to use ng model forms feature. So we'll go here, in the import section we will say it should have forms module. Now if we go back to our parent component.html file, you see the error is gone. Okay, that's it. Now we just need to go into our app component.html file and define our parent component. So we'll just delete this bit, and here we'll just say our app parent component, and we need to define our child component here, right, in our parent. So we'll say app child component. Now inside the child component we need to pass our message property. So message we want to communicate with our parent message property, which is this one. So we want to send to our child component this parent message, right? So we are setting up a one-way communication from our parent to child using this one. Now if we save this and we go to our parent component, you can say here it says child received the message hello from parent. Now as you can see, when we type in the parent component's input field, which is this, the message immediately displays in our child component. This is the power of the input decorator. So it creates a one-way data binding from our parent to our child component. So same we can do for our child to parent communication as well. If we are doing some changes in child and we want to reflect it on our parent component, we can use @output decorator. So next thing we'll be focusing on is child to parent communication, and for that we will be using @output decorator. So as I explained, what if the child needs to send some data back? Like this child, what if it needs to send some data back to its parent? This is where we will be using @output decorator, and this output decorator comes with EventEmitter. So I'll show you how to do that. We can use a classic example of whenever a button is clicked in our child component, we want to send some data back to our parent component, right? So let's update our child component file. We will set here input text, and this input text would be of type text, and we will again define an ng model property here, and this time, and we will define an ng model property here, and we will bind it to our reply property, and this reply we will define in our TS file. But before that we will have a button, and this button would have a click event, and this click event will call this send reply button. This reply will take this reply, okay, as an input text, and we can show it in our parent component. So here we can call the button reply to parent. Now inside the TS file, first we will initiate our variable, which is reply, and which will be of type string, currently as an empty string, okay. And what we need to do is we need to set a output event emitter, right? Because we want to send data from our child to parent. So for those we use @output event emitter, and this output event emitter we will call this reply event, as this will be of type event emitter. So we'll say equals to new event emitter, and this will be of type string, okay. Now whenever our send reply button is clicked, basically this button, and this method is called, at that time we want to take that reply and send it to our parent component. So we'll say this dot reply event, and all the event emitters comes with the emit method. So this emit method we'll make sure to emit the value to our parent component. So we'll say this dot reply event dot emit, and we can send whatever we want here, which is basically a string. So we send our reply here. This reply basically through ng model, it has the value whatever user has written. Now every time we send the reply, we want to clear our input field as well. So I can say this dot reply equals to empty field. This is optional. And now we need to go to our parent component in order to receive this reply, right? So we'll go into our HTML file. So where we are receiving all this stuff from our child, right? So in our child, now we want to receive, and whenever you want to receive data, you use the round bracket, and whenever you want to send, you use the square. So to receive, we'll use the round bracket, and we will make sure it is the same name as our property which we have mentioned here, which is reply event. So we'll copy this as this is the output property, and here inside this we'll mention it, and whenever basically that event emitter is triggered, this one, we want to call a method which is handle reply, and we can do whatever we want, and basically this will have a event in it. Now we'll take this and we will initialize it in our parent component, and as I said, it has an event, right? So we'll say it would be a message of type string. Okay, now we can declare one more property, which is we can say child reply, right? And child reply could be of empty string, and we can say this dot child reply equals to the message, right, which we are receiving here from this event emitter here. Okay, now cool. Now one last thing we need to do is we need to go in our HTML in order to display this reply from in the parent component, right? So here we will say it will be div, and this div basically will have a p tag, and here we will say child replied, right? And we will bind it to our child reply property, and that's it. And we can say that we only want to show this when our child reply is true, right? So if child reply exists, then only we want to show this, which is this child reply. Okay, now if we save this and go to our file here, you can see currently we don't see anything because of our ngIf directive here. So to test it out, we will enter some text in our child component. So I'll say data, okay, from child, and now as soon as I click here reply to parent button, the parent component will receive the data and it will display the message. As you can see here, child replied, and this is data from child, and you see it also emptied the data here, emptied the input field. We can write something new, and we can say new data from child, right, XYZ, and that will do it as well. It's updated here. So this kind of pattern is really useful when you are dealing with form submissions and buttons from parent to child and vice versa. So any scenario where a child component needs to modify. So as you can see, in any kind of scenario where a child component needs to notify its parent component about an event or send some data up to the component tree, we can use our output decorator as well. Now next thing we will do is direct component access with child view. For example, sometimes we need more direct access to a child component properties, right? For example, we are in a parent here, in a parent component, and we want to access our child method. For example, there is a method in our child component, this one, and we want to access it, and we don't want to do all these things. At that time, we can use our ViewChild. So which is our next topic, which is direct component access with ViewChild. So let's modify our example to access the child component's method and properties directly from our parent component. So in our parent component TS file, in order to use ViewChild, first we need to import it. So we will use the ViewChild decorator, which is @ViewChild, and the component which we want to view and use its method. In our case, it's the child component, which is this one. So as soon as I write this, it imports child component. Okay. Now this child component, Now I will name however I want to call it, so I'll say it same, which is child component, and this will be of type child component. Okay, and for this we'll put this. Now if we go to our child component, you can see that we have a property called message, right? Okay, so in order to access our message property, this time what we will do is, by using ViewChild, we will here create a method. We will say a method called update child directly. So traditionally, how we used to use our event binders to get the data, now we will directly get those data from our this method. So we want to directly interact with our child. First we will say that if this dot child component, if that is true, like, then only. If that's not null, then we will go to our child component, and as you can see, we have access to all the properties in our child component, which are message, reply, event, and all of those. So we want to set our message to whatever we want, and we will say updated directly using ViewChild. Okay, now we will go to our parent component, and in our HTML we will define a button to trigger this. So we will say whenever our click event is called, we want to call the update child directly method, right? Whenever that method is called, we are gonna update our child, but we won't be using this to do that. Okay, we just need to call our button here, which will name it update child directly. Okay, now if we save it and go to our application, okay, so now when we click our update child directly button, we are bypassing the normal input binding, right, which I showed, and we are directly modifying our child property, which is this property, and for that we are using our ViewChild. So you can see ViewChild is really powerful, but you have to use it really carefully, as it couples your component methods and it can make your testing a bit harder. So generally try to stick with the input and output property for most of the use cases. So only use your ViewChild for scenarios like where you need to directly access your component method, right? So whenever you are dealing with third-party components and directives, that time you can use our ViewChild. Okay. So next topic would be content projection with content child. So Angular provides with another interesting pattern called content projection. So basically where a parent component can project content into a child component. Okay. For that we will be using ng content. So let's create a card component that can actually accept a content. So I'll create a new node terminal here, and inside that I will say ng gc, and inside the components I will create a card component. Now this will create a card component here, and now I want to, okay, now inside if we go to our card component.html file, we will have a div, and this will have a hash tree. So this will have our title in it, okay, the card title, and we will have another div, and this div basically will project our content. So our content we will use ng content, right, like this, and ng content will remove this. So this would be, so we'll just give it a class called card body just to make it look better, and same for this one, we'll give it a class called card. Okay, now so this one I'll give the name card header, and this one I'll give class card, and I'll just put it inside this. Okay, I've just done some basic styling, and just inside the CSS I'll just paste this basic styling. You can just copy and paste. And now to solve the error, we will define our title property and we'll call it card title. Cool. So this will solve our error. Now in order to use our content, we will say @content child. As you can see, it's been provided here, and this will basically, we will call it content heading. Okay, and here we will define the name of it again, which will be content heading. Okay, and this will be of type element ref. Just stick with it and you will know what we're doing. Now in order to use content child and stuff, we usually use after our component is loaded properly. So we will implement here after content init, right? So we'll implement the interface as well here, as you can see, and inside this we will say only if our content heading, which is this one, if this is not null, right? If this exists, then we want to log our content heading, which is projected content heading, and this should be this dot content heading dot native element, right? So this I'll just show you in the console, and then I'll say this dot title, and this should be equals to this dot content heading dot native element dot text content. So here what we are doing is, what we have done is we have set our title, which is this title, right, with our content heading, and we are getting the text content from it. Now I'll show you what we're trying to do. If we go to our card component, okay, so now if we go to our parent component, so now we can display our app card component here. So we can just say app card, and inside that we can have a h4 tag. So here what we will do is we will write our content heading, the one which we defined, right, in our card component. So content heading. Now what this will do is this will give us access to whatever name we write here. So for example, if we write here user profile, now what this will do is this user profile here, it will get it from here and store it inside the this.title and then display it on our child component. So now inside here, now we'll design our card component more, and we'll say, for example, it can have a p tag like the content is projected from parent component, right, which is our app card, and inside this we can even show our child component. So here we will say message property, and we will say I am projected inside a card. So you can see we have made a reusable card component, and according to our cards here, different cards, we can have different profile, and it will pick up using this bit here and update our HTML. So I will save this and show you it in action. So as you can see, both the profiles are loaded here, our user profile and app profile. So like this, content projection is a really powerful way if you want to create like reusable UI components like we have created here. So you can use it to create models, cards, or even different tabs. Okay, so next thing we will do is component communication via our services. So all these methods we have worked till now, they all work really good if you want to communicate between parent and child relationship, but it can be a really big hassle if you want to communicate between components which are really far in the tree. Like if there's a component here and you want to communicate with, like, there's more components here inside those, so you want to communicate between the two components which are far inside that tree. At that time you cannot use these kind of techniques. So for that's where our services comes in. So as you know, so services basically act as a central store, and any component can inject those services and use them. So I will use the simple communication service which I have created already to show you how to use that. So if I go here, so in our data service.ts file, I'll just open this and close all the other files. So we will use our data service to update our messages and also to subscribe those. So firstly, we will be using behavior subject to maintain the latest value of our messages. So I will say here private message source. So our source of the message will come from our behavior subject, and these behavior subject are basically imported from RxJS. They allowed us to maintain the latest value of whatever variable we want. So here we'll say this would be of type string, and we will define it with some initial value, and we'll just say initial message. Now we will create an observable which our components can subscribe to, right, using our services. So we will declare our variable called current message, and this will be of type observable, as we want to use our component to subscribe to it, right? And this would be of type string, and we will say and we will say current message, basically this would be equals to this dot our message source, which is our behavior subject, and we want to use it as observable. So we have created our observable, which is current message, right? And this will always have our latest value. So that's it. That's how you create observable, and if you want that observable to have the latest value, we connect it with our behavior subject. Now next thing we will do is we will create a method, okay, to update our message. Okay, so we will say update message, and this method basically it will take our message, which will be of type string. Cool. And we will say this dot message source. Okay, and as it's a subject, we will use next, so we will pass our message into it. So we can go to any of the component which wants to use our service. In our case, it will be our sibling component. So we'll go here, and inside this we will define a message variable, which will be of type string, empty value, and we will have a new message, same of type string, and initial value empty. Now inside this we will implement our on init, and we will say here ng on init, and inside this what we want to do is we want to subscribe to our data, right? So data which we are gonna have in our services. So we want to use our services here, right? The data service. So in that, to use that, we need to inject it. So we will use our constructor, and we will say private data service, and that will be of type data service. Cool. So now we have access to our data service and its method here. So we can say this dot data service dot current message, and this is current message, right? The observable. So we are subscribing to the observable using dot subscribe, and inside the message we'll open our arrow bracket, and we will give the value from the message value, which is this message, right? We are gonna store it on inside our this message variable. Okay, so now we'll go to our HTML, and we will write some logic in order to send or update the message, right? So this will be a div, and inside the div we will have a hash to it. Okay, and inside this we will have an input tag, and the input tag, basically this will have our message, right? The message which user want to write, and ng model we will bind it to our new message, whatever user is writing, and we will have a button in order to call our method. So it will have a click event listener, which will call a update message method, and this update message we will call it update shared message. So okay, so I'll just do some styling for it, and now I'll just paste some styling here. So you can just copy and paste this styling. This will make our component look more interactive. Now in our TS file, we'll implement the logic, right? The update message. Whenever user types a message, we want to update it. So I'll declare the update message here. Now what we will do is we'll have a if condition, and we want to check first if our new message exists or not. If this is not null, like if it exists, then we want to call our data service, and we want to call our update message method. This is the method which we have declared here. Now what it does is, so it takes the message and it uses next to pass it to our message source. Okay, so in our component here, now we can call this update message with our new message, whatever user is typing, right? And once we have done this, we can make it empty again. Okay, now if we go to our app component here, and if we say here app sibling, now we will go to our any of the component where we want to access the updated messages which we do from our sibling component, right? For example, whatever message we write here and we update it, it will be shared to our service. So if you want to access it, we can go to any of the component we want. For example, if we go to our parent component, right, So inside the parent component, we can have our constructor here, right? And we can say private data service, which will be of type data service. And now we can create our subscription and get access to that updated message from our sibling, right? So I'll say here private subscription, and this will be of type subscription like this. And now inside the constructor, I can just call my subscription here. So I'll say this dot subscription, and this here I'll call my data service. And as I have access to the current message, I can subscribe to it, and I'll say the data, whatever it is, and I want to put it inside the shared message. So I can declare a variable called shared message, and this shared message would be of type string, yeah. And I'll store the value inside this. So I'll say shared message equals to data. Now I can display this shared message in our HTML. So here we can say we can have one more p tag, and here we can display our shared message, right? So now if we go to our component here, right, and as you can see, I will write a message here and I want it to be shared, right, to all other components. So I'll say new message using services. Now as soon as I do it, you see this component, they are using the subscription, they get updated whatever message we write here in our sibling component. We can test it again by writing a different message. We can say different message from service or whatever. You see, that's what service help us with. You can store message from any of the component into our data service here, and you can use the observable with subject, and you can use these methods to do that. And then you can create a subscription in any of the component, and you can have access to those variables or the data which you have put. So it will update in real time, and this is really useful in our Angular application where we are changing data at a place and we want other places of our application to update it. So now next thing we will do is we will build a practical notification system which will help you to understand our services in a better way, and also how to do communication between different components. Okay, so we already have a notification component here. For that, we will create a notification service. So we will say here, so once I do that, it will create a notification service here inside our services, this one. So first we will create a notification service, and inside that first we will have our notification interface, like how we want our application to show notification, right? Its type. So we will create notification export interface, and we will call it notification, okay? And this would be with a capital N. And this interface, basically it would have a message, and that message would be of type string. So we are defining our notification type here, right? The object, and the type, we can have different type of notification, right? So it could be like success, and it could be error, like all of those things like this. Next thing, we'll have a duration of our notification, like how long we want to show our notification. So that would be of type number, okay? And you want to provide your notification in root, so it's available throughout our application, okay? Now next thing we'll do is we'll say private notification subject, and we will assign new behavior subject to it, right? So we can later on use it as an observable. So I'll say new behavior subject, and this will be of type notification, okay? Or in the beginning it could be null, and here I'll put null as well, okay? Now I'll have a notification dollar, so this will be our observable. And so for that we will say this dot notification subject dot as observable. So now we have converted this into a behavior observable here, okay? Now we can define our methods. So our first method of the service would be show notifications, okay? And show notification method, this one will take three things, right? A message, type, and duration. So we'll just give that here. So it will take a message of type string, a type of this basically. Okay, so I'll just copy paste, and last thing we will pass is our duration. That will be, for example, 3 seconds. Okay, and now inside the method what we want to do, so duration is what we are keeping static right now, and we will say that every time this method is called, which is show notification, we want to call our subject and we want to call next on it. Okay, as it will update the observable then with the values we need. So we will say pass the message type, whatever user is sending from the component, and our duration, and this would be string here. It should like this. Yeah, so that's it. Now what we need to do is we need to clear our notification, right? Because after 3 seconds we need to auto dismiss it. So we will say here using set timeout that inside this it would be of duration, right? This duration, and we will say here this dot clear notification, and we will define our clear notification method here. Cool. So this clear notification method, this we will define after this, as we want to clear our notification. We'll define after this, as we want to clear our notification once we have shown the notification, right? So we will say for that this dot behavior subject, which is our notification subject, this one, and this time we want to update its value to null, right? So the subject which you have, this one, our notification subject, it will always have the updated value. So first we updated it with this thing, our message type and duration. Then whenever clear notification is called, we want to make it null, right? Because we don't want to show notification. So every time show notification is called, we will call clear notification only after the duration is passed, which is 3000 millisecond, which is 3 seconds. Okay, so now next step would be to create our dynamic notification UI, which will listen to changes from these services. Okay, so we will go to our notification component here, and we will create its UI so that it listens to changes from our notification services. Okay, so you can create the component using ngc components, and inside you can create this notification. Now once you've done that, I'll say here we will define a notification. Okay, and that notification will be of type notification interface. Okay, this one. Now this would be also of type null, and in beginning we'll define it as null here. Okay, now we'll have our constructor, and inside constructor we will inject our notification service. So we'll say private notification, and that notify service basically your type notification service. Okay, and inside this, after I'll implement my ng on it method, inside this we will say this dot notification service. So now we want to call our notification service, right? So inside this we want to hear from our service, right, whatever changes it has. So we'll say this dot notification service, and then we want to have access to the observable, and then we can subscribe to the observable and get the data we want, in our case which is notification. So we will say notification, and inside the arrow bracket we will say that we want to give our notification variable this value which it's received, which is this notification, right? And this notification is nothing but this notification right here. Okay, and obviously we will create one more method which we can call it our dismiss method, and this method will basically clear our notification. So we will say this dot notification service, and we will call our method which is clear notification. Basically it's calling this method clear notification, right? As we will have a button which we want to click, then user should clear the notification. So we have done that here now. Okay, the dismiss button. Great. So next thing which we can do is we can go to our HTML, and we will create a div, and basically this div, we will only show this div as it's a notification div, right? We only want to show it when we have our notification present there, like if this is true, like if notification exists, and we will give some styling here. Okay, so I'll say ng class, and I will say based on notification.type, I want to give class like red, orange, like depends on the type of notification. And I'll just give it a class called notification container, and inside this we'll have a span, and that span basically will have our notification.message, the message you want to show, and next we can have a button to close our notification. So this button can be like our cross sign, so I'll just show like this using asterisk, and we can have a click listener basically which will listen to this dismiss method. So every time dismiss method is called, right, by clicking on this button, it will clear our notification. Now we just need to put some styling here, so I'll just copy and paste some styling which I've got. You can also just either pause the screen and copy from here. So we have got like success, error, warning and info, different colors for them, right? Okay, so last thing we need to do is now actually we need to add our notification component to our app component.html. So it is actually available. So here we will go and we will add it here. We will say app notification. So notification like this, and now we have our notification components loaded in our app module. Okay, so now we have our app notification system available globally in our application. Okay, great. Now final thing we need to do is we want to call our notification, right? We need to trigger notification from anywhere in the application, so we can do that now. So for example, we'll go to the parent component, which is this component. So inside the HTML file here we will create two buttons, and we'll call those buttons. So this we can call show success, and this will be like show error. Okay, and this button basically whenever we have click event on it, whenever someone clicks on this button, we want to call our notify success method, and we will create that method now. And whenever this button is called, we will create another method and we will call that notify error. Okay, now we'll create these two methods in our TS file. So here we will have two methods, which is notify success, and we will have one more method which is, so both of our errors are gone from here. Now what we'll do is, in order to success notify our service, we need to inject our services here, right? So inside the constructor we will import our notification service. So here, okay, now inside the method here, whenever this method is called, we'll say this dot notification service dot show notification, and we can pass the message as we have defined here. It will take a message, a type and the duration. So we'll pass like, for example, task completed successfully. Okay, and we need to pass what kind of message we want to pass. For example, in this case it's success, so we can either pass a duration or it can be optional as well, as I have written here, and we are taking by default 3000 for now, so no need to pass it. Now same thing we'll do is we will do for our notify error. So here we will say wrong, as this is for notifying user that there is an error. So here we will have error one, right? And that's it. Now if we go to our application here, and here you can see we have a show success and show error methods. Okay, so if I click show success button here, you can see I have task completed successfully here, and you see it's gone within 3 seconds. And if I click here and if I click on crosshair, you see it's gone. And now if I click on show error, it will stay again for 3 seconds. You can see our notification is there, and therefore if you want it for a longer duration, you can change the duration as well. Great. So I hope you understood from this notification system that how powerful services are, which help us to enable communication between any components in our Angular application, regardless of their relationship in our Angular component tree. So in the next video, we'll dive deeper into creating truly reusable components in Angular. So make sure to subscribe for more Angular content. Thanks for watching and happy coding.